Cool. Floor's yours.
Thank you. Welcome to our council meeting, the first for 2025. I will acknowledge the Whadjuk people as the traditional owners of the Greater Fremantle Walyalup area, and we recognise that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important today. Just for information, the meeting is being recorded and streamed live online. While all care is taken to maintain privacy, visitors in the public gallery and members of the public submitting a question may be captured in the recording. So we go to attendance and apologies. There's apologies from Mayor Fitzharding and Councillor Williamson Wong. I think everybody else is here. Yep. Do we have any applications for leave of absence? No. Thank you. Disclosures of interest by members? No. Responses to previous public questions taken on notice are in the agenda, but we'll take those as read at this stage and we'll move on to public question time. So we have several people listed. Perhaps what I'll do is deal with those relating to the AUKUS topic, and perhaps Sam Wainwright, former councillor of the City of Fremantle, would you like to come to the podium? Thank you, Sam. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and yeah, thank you, councillors and officers. So I want to comment on C2501-1, the information report, responding to the petition that was tabled in August. My comments and questions were sent electronically, so hopefully you've had them, but if not, I'll read them out and then I'll circulate a hard copy to you.
I'll just let you know we have received them and
Very good,
presumably read. Yep.
Point 1 of the petition that was submitted to the council meeting on the 14th of August 2024 requests that council, quote, call on the Commonwealth Government to ban the berthing of nuclear-powered or armed submarines at Stirling Naval Base, given its proximity to a larger population. The CEO's response that, quote, there is no foundation in the current policy to call on the Commonwealth Government to ban nuclear-powered or nuclear-armed vessels at Stirling Naval Base. It further goes on to observe that regardless of where nuclear-powered and or armed vessels are moored, the city has no head of power in relation to this matter. And what I want to stress is that that response avoids acknowledging the very basis of the request in the first instance, which is precisely to advocate for what we regard as the best interests of the residents of the City of Fremantle. In the event of a serious leak, it would obviously affect Fremantle. And it's obvious that it would affect the City of Fremantle, the population with it, and the ecosystems within it. The CEO's report in this regard fails to mention the footnote, very explicitly referenced in this section of the petition, Hazmat Annex A, radiation escape from a nuclear-powered warship. State hazard plan, specifically 2.1, responsibility for prevention and or mitigation. The anchorage locations have been selected so that in the unlikely event of a reference accident, it is unlikely that any residences would be impacted or persons subjected to a radiation hazard requiring countermeasures. And of course, basing nuclear submarines in Cockburn Sound precisely contradicts Hazmat Annex A in this respect by locating them adjacent to a dense urban environment. So my first question is, does the council not believe it has a duty of care to residents to advocate for their safety and security and to request measures be taken by other levels of government, that is to say advocacy, to minimise risk consistent with the advice in Hazmat Annex A? In responding to point 2 of the petition, the CEO's report claims that, quote, the presence of nuclear-powered or nuclear-armed vessels is not in contradiction of the city's nuclear-free policy, and that it may want to take advocacy position in support of the United Nations Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. I believe this is an overly narrow interpretation of the city's nuclear-free policy and not consistent with its spirit. This is particularly evident when it is read in conjunction with the other positions and actions of the city, some of which I know Adrian will talk to. On the 20th of November 2018, then Mayor Brad Pettit signed the ICANN Cities Appeal, which is a global call from cities and towns in support of the UN Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons on behalf of the city, not as an individual, on behalf of the city. The council resolution authorising the mayor to do so reads, quote, the city's appeal is consistent with the formal and ongoing nuclear-free Fremantle policy Fremantle is a lead city for the Mayors for Peace network in Australia, and that's a resolution that would have been voted for by at least 4 current serving councillors, I should think. The ICANN website notes that was communicated to the federal government and the Shadow Minister. So my second question is this. The Council's existing adopted policy amounts to an explicit position of advocacy in favour of the elimination of nuclear weapons. It already does. That is the standing policy. How can Council receive a report that is simply wrong on this point of fact by implying it doesn't have such an adopted position? So given that the report fails to adequately address the 2 points of the petition I discussed, there are others, but those 2, and further includes assertions that are incorrect, I ask councillors not to accept or adopt the report in its current form.
Thank you, Sam. Did you want to comment?
I can make a comment if we like.
Yeah, we'll certainly take on board what you've sent through to us, but do we want to make a comment? Yeah.
So through the chair, in response to Mr Wainwright's comments there, the nuclear-free policy that the City of Fremantle currently has really has a foundation of speaking to nuclear facilities in the City of Fremantle and specifically in the district of the City of Fremantle. It does skirt around the provision of nuclear vessels coming to visit the port, but predominantly it talks about having a nuclear power plant, waste facilities and those sorts of things. I don't believe it goes to calling for disarmament or banning nuclear weapons.
Thank you. I'll just let you know that we've received the information and all of us have got the copy, and I'm sure several of us will have a good look through it following the meeting. Thanks, Sam.
I had a question. Sorry.
Sorry, yes, question. Councillor Lang. Yeah.
Following the CEO's
Yeah.
response, do you feel satisfied with that response, Sam? Yes or no? Yes or no?
A very short answer. I wasn't trying to dismiss it. I think there are a lot of complexities in what you have said, and I don't think what we're dealing with here tonight necessarily is the last phase of this whole discussion. So I think what I'm saying is I think we could receive what we've got here tonight. We've got what you've also said, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more discussion about this topic into the future. But if you'd like to add to that, please go ahead very shortly, briefly.
Because of the resolution passed in 2018, I'll say
Yeah.
because of the resolution passed in 2018 in particular, of course I would say no, because I think the nuclear-free policy should be read in conjunction with it and also the city's long history of association with the Mayors for Peace.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the elected members? No. I'll now invite Leonie Lundy to speak on this item, please.
Good evening and thank you. The city's nuclear-free policy opposes, I quote, the construction of a nuclear waste facility in Western Australia. This is acknowledged in the CEO's response to the AUKUS petition on this meeting agenda. The petition was launched prior to the disclosure that AUKUS would entail a temporary low-level waste facility at HMAS Stirling on Garden Island, just 20 kilometres from here. In fact, the waste facility is a requirement for the rotations of US nuclear-powered submarines to occur 2027 onwards. In June 2024, Dr. Margaret Beavis from the Medical Association for Prevention of War exposed the disinformation being circulated by Defence and the Australian Submarine Agency about the grade of low-level waste to be generated and managed, that the waste was not analogous to hospital waste as claimed. The vast majority of nuclear waste from hospitals is very short-lived waste or very low-level waste, both of which go to normal rubbish streams after a month or two. The proposed submarine waste is low-level waste, which needs isolation from the environment for up to 300 years. At the council meeting on July 10, 2024, I requested, especially in the light of this information, if council would agree to immediately reconsider its support for the SIF, the waste facility, as indicated in the PSW, or Perth South West Metro Alliance's recent submission to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Public Works for submarine rotational force west priority works at HMAS Stirling. The response received that Fremantle Council had not explicitly supported or opposed the proposal for a controlled industrial facility on Garden Island was and remains erroneous. It confused the Perth South West Metro Alliance's submission for the parliamentary inquiry on the Australian Naval Nuclear Power Safety Bill with its submission for the priority works as referenced above. If the Perth South West Metro Alliance comments in their submission, we reiterate that the Alliance is not looking to delay the works proposed. We recognise that they are critical to meeting the short time frames related to AUKUS. If this isn't greenlighting, then what is? We now understand the proposed dry dock facility for depot maintenance on the AUKUS nuclear-powered submarines at the Henderson Defence Precinct will entail a similar waste facility there, on WA mainland and less than 12 kilometres from where we are tonight. I request Council to correct its previous error in the interests of community health and safety, to please pay close attention to these developments and again to reconsider its support for any AUKUS or other nuclear waste facility in Cockburn Sound area which would have an undeniable impact on the Fremantle municipality, let alone contravene Council policy. To this effect, I also request Council to vote against the officer's recommendation that no further action is required in response to the correct Help Keep Cockburn Sound Nuclear Free petition. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just take that on board and in line with what we've already discussed, and we'll discuss the item when we get to the agenda. Thank you. So we'll move on to Felicity Townsend.
Thank you for having me and taking my question. My question and statement is regarding AUKUS and the Perth Southwest Metro Alliance US trip due diligence. It's in response to an elector's query at the 10 July Ordinary Council meeting, re the purpose of the Mayor and CEO's US study trip. The City responded, the delegation will focus on gaining a better understanding of emergency management procedures related to the presence of submarines, as well as understanding how best to support incoming personnel and their families associated with the program. And the City's response to my question on the 14th of August, Ordinary Council meeting, further expanded that the City is very aware that any emergency response, the City will play an active part in it. The City are a member of the Local Emergency Management Committee in the local area. There will be others that lead, but the City will be required to provide support, and the City will learn a little bit about that as well. Community safety and security is a major concern. It is therefore unacceptable that the PSWMA Mayor's and CEO's report on the trip fails to mention any due diligence undertaken in regard to emergency procedures. It is also of concern that the City takes for granted community agreement to the influx of US personnel and families, even though they will impact negatively on the already existing housing shortage in the suburbs around Cockburn Sound, the already congested road traffic and lack of health and other social services. Can the City please justify the apparent PR role it is playing for defence, rather than providing vital information and enabling democratic community input for such an important and impactful issue for the community? Thank you.
Thank you, Felicity. I'll take that on board and it will get discussed when we get to that item. Are there any questions from the elected members? No? I'll ask for Louis de Villiers, please.
Kaya, and thanks for the opportunity to speak here. About AUKUS, I suggest the CEO's response to the AUKUS petition contains misinterpretations, even errors, which cloud the issue and undermine the credibility of the report. One example is regarding the petition point 3. The request is not for the City to take responsibility for the actual procedures, including the provision of iodine tablets, which are obviously the responsibility of other departments. It is simply for the City to ensure its residents are immediately informed i.e. for the city to responsibly use its position as an impacted local government area to advocate for accountability and community awareness. In effect, this complies with HAZMAT Section 3.4, Community Information and Education, which states there will be a joint effort by the WA Police Force, Radiation Health and relevant local governments to develop awareness, when appropriate, for hazards identified relating to nuclear-powered warships and establish the profile of any community at risk. As required, the public is to be informed of the hazards, probabilities, emergency management plans at all levels, warning and response arrangements, and any actions which may be expected of them. Furthermore, the urgent protection zone includes any 30-degree downwind sector within a circle of radius 2.8 kilometers centered around the nuclear-powered warship, which may require evacuation. See Annex A on page 30. Given the renowned Fremantle doctor, one doesn't need to have much imagination to realize how any incident or towing in Coburn Sound or anchorage at Gage Road of an incident vessel could likely impact on Fremantle and North Fremantle. The report fails to factor in HAZMAT Annex A and the Defence Operations Manual, both relevant to local government. It is concerning that the city is unable to acknowledge or is perhaps unaware that under the HAZMAT Section 5.1, quote, local government under the Emergency Management Act of 2005, it is a function of local government to manage recovery following an emergency affecting the community within its boundary. In some circumstances, it may be necessary for the state government to assume responsibility for coordinating the recovery process at a whole of government level. So in light of that, I ask that the Council please not accept the current report on the petition and to vote against the officer's recommendation in this regard. In a similar vein, on 23 October 2024, I brought a concern and question to Council. Does the city still support the community naval nuclear safety being in the hands of the Defence Minister? And if so, why? If not, why has the city not spoken up for our community and raised these concerns with ARPANZA and the Defence Department? The response I received claimed that the City of Fremantle, through the Perth Southwest Metropolitan Alliance, provided a submission on the bill, and one of the items raised was the governance structure. The Alliance made the comment within the report that the regulator shouldn't report to the Defence Minister. I suggest there is no such comment in the Perth Southwest Metro Alliance's submission. Can the city's response please be reconsidered? Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. We'll just take that information on board and discuss it in the item. Now call on Adrian Glamorgan, please.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Kaya, I speak to you as someone who's had the opportunity to speak to someone deformed by nuclear weapons in Kazakhstan, who's witnessed jellyfish babies born in the Marshall Islands, who've been affected by the Maralinga and Emu Fields detonations. And let me tell you that every promise and reassurance that governments give you about how safe nuclear weapons are and how all the promises they give you will be observed are not to be trusted. Council is meant to represent the whole of the community. The previous mayor was conscientious about his duties to the Navy, as he should have been, as well as to peace issues in Fremantle. But this council appears to have withdrawn its peace activities to focus on military issues. It's ignored the opportunities for building community and making international connections, which is part of multi-track diplomacy, are soft roles that councils can informally play to keep open avenues for communication and understanding. Instead, council seems at risk of being blinded by promises of financial benefit, blinded by promises of money that emanate from the US Defence Public Relations Department, and the self-deception that somehow being a nuclear target protects us from harm. Students are being offered STEM classes that will draw them into the arms game. Former Foreign Affairs Minister Gareth Evans revealed that when Australian facilities were being used in the Iraq War, the Americans refused to regard our joint military bases here as anything but their own tools and used them as they pleased, disregarding our sovereignty. We've been warned. We had another warning yesterday. Were you looking? The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists moved the doomsday clock closer to midnight. We've never been closer to nuclear war in a structural sense. Since 2013, this council took a lead role for the protection of this city through Mayors for Peace and insisted that we and 10,000 member cities around the world should never ever be used as nuclear targets or play a part in threatening any other city with nuclear weapons. And I just pause to ask a question of the CEO to explore the role of the Fremantle Declaration of Nuclear Weapons, which was around 2014, I think, which we made with all the kinds of considerations that are being discussed tonight and accepted by this council, as well as its support for ICANN, as well as ALGA's position on the Treaty of the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Without any consultation, this council has quietly pulled out from Mayors of Peace leadership, meekly focused on turning our Coburn Sound into a nuclear target with no proper plans for mass evacuation in case of war and only vague assurances in case of nuclear accident. In my work as a journalist, I tried to find out about 6 years ago who was responsible in cases as we're talking about now, and I got sent back and forth until finally a sergeant from the police station was told to speak to me and he didn't want to. It's not new for me. I've seen this happen in other places as well. The vague assurances in case of nuclear accident doesn't strike me as core business. Sorry, you do not strike, your work is not focusing on core business. You do not have community trust and you're not building a better world. You've misunderstood how building a culture of peace in our own local community can make a difference in our public spaces, in our civic dialogue, bring safety into homes and build right relationship with local Noongar people. And in recent times, you've spent all your money to learn about the making of war, but not the making of peace. When COVID came, you said you had no room for thinking about nuclear weapons. And now it's over, that's all you're thinking about, but on the wrong side of history, international law and humanity. Of course, you have limits on what you can do as local councils are constrained, but nothing constrains you from taking a break from the military spiel and be reminded of what the community wants and genuinely needs to know. That petition that was presented to you is real and a proper expression of concern, and it deserves your response.
Thank you, Adrian. Was there anybody else who was to speak on that particular issue? I think we've done all those. We'll go on to the remainder of people speaking. Ian Kerr.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I speak on a much more mundane subject. On the 20th of January, the City posted on its Facebook page that, quote, issues had arisen that required attention and rectification, and that the building contractor will be working to fix a problem with the concrete slab for the South Beach toilets and change rooms currently under construction. This would involve removing and replacing the original material. It now appears from the full depth saw cuts across the whole of the slab that the whole slab is to be removed and replaced. Additional information provided by the City to WA Today added, and again I quote, the concrete slab was not laid according to specification and that the floor could be replaced without impacting the rest of the complete works. Moreover, it said that the contractor has developed a methodology to ensure the removal works are carried out without damage to the other structures, which very much implies that there is potential for damage. So my first question is, in view of the contractor's apparent inability to follow the specification in laying the original slab, what will the City be doing to ensure that remedial works are undertaken to the required standard? Initial works for the rectification have included removing 4 full-depth squares about 1 metre square from the slab along the eastern wall and repouring to about 5 centimetres lower. Now my second question is this piecemeal approach consistent with the approved methodology and, more importantly even, with the required integrity of the replacement slab, bearing in mind that this probably involved cutting into the reinforcement? A third issue is that the steel roof support poles on the western side of the building are embedded in the concrete slab. As a cost-saving measure, the original high-grade stainless steel for these poles was replaced by galvanised steel, despite the risk of rust. So my third question is, what measures will be taken to ensure that removal and replacement of the concrete slab does not damage the rust protection of the galvanised steel poles? According to the city, the construction timeline will be adjusted, and it's not the first time, to accommodate these works, but completion of the change facility is still anticipated in the first half of 2025, and that this work, again I quote, will not lead to additional project costs for the city. And my fourth and last question is based on the remedial works will be a significant additional cost to the contractor. In view of the difficult negotiations over the price for this project, is the city confident that the contractor has the financial and other resources to complete the project to the required standard and within budget, and that the city will not be faced with the need to find a new contractor to finish the job at a presumably additional cost to the city? Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. You're very good at keeping to the 3 minutes. I'll ask the Director of Infrastructure to comment, please.
Thank you, through the chair. In respect to question 1, how do we ensure that remedial works are undertaken to the required standard? And you touched on it yourself, Ian. The city have been working with the contractor to ensure that it's done to a standard by developing a detailed methodology and an approach to do that. So the city and the officers engage with external consultants and industry specialists to define an approach and to ensure that that was adequate and appropriate. And we are now monitoring the contractor in respect to them following that methodology as agreed. Your second question in respect to slabs being removed and re-poured, simply not correct. There's been no concrete re-pours. I think possibly you might be looking at the set downs that are already there for the shower wet areas. So at this point in time, there's been no re-pour work. Your third question in respect to protection of the steel poles, as I said in question 1, we're following an agreed methodology, which does include provision for protection of the columns and the external walls. That's one of the key points that we've looked at in terms of how they approach the removal, and noting in that the columns and the walls are separated from the concrete anyway with a separate special filler. So that helps the disconnection. The final question in respect to the contractor and his financial resources. To be fair, the contractors work really well with us, so we've been really pleased with their response. So they're committed and they've engaged with officers to ensure that we do complete the works properly and we have a quality outcome, which is what we've talked about all along. And as you may be aware, the city does undertake third-party financial checks with contractors prior to engagement. And at this point, we don't see any reason to expect there'll be problems in respect to that. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now call on Barry Healy to talk about Nannine Common.
Yes, councillors. In my position as chairperson of the Nannine Common Community Garden Committee, I actually sent around the annual report from our annual meeting a couple of weeks ago to you, and I hope you all read that wonderful, scintillating little report with beautiful photos of community volunteers and their children working every month in the garden area. And I just wanted to reiterate to you that Nannine Common Community Garden is ongoing, and we are looking to develop the vegetable gardens. And actually, it just occurred to me today when I was thinking about what I should speak to you about this evening. I spoke to you last year about the prospect of the social housing that's going to be built in the WGV Eco Village. And and the prospect of community development work to welcome those residents as they come in to the area, and the role that the community garden can play in that. And it has occurred to me, I had been thinking of, that project coming into being when the plans are set, as the residents start to move in. But I've realised, of course, we have to start moving earlier. And so what I think I will do coming out of tonight is I'll put together a project management plan and go to the council community development staff with the idea of preparing the way for that social housing as it comes in. The idea is we go to Murdoch University, we go to their community development faculty, and we get them to assign some students to work as volunteers, that we do community mapping, we talk to existing residents, to those who, and gather the names of people who would be prepared to welcome the new residents, with an eye to things like the people who are already dog walkers on the golf course. If someone moves in with a dog, we can partner them up, and get them integrated into the community. If somebody moves in who's got a particular interest in sewing or darning or whatever, we get them in contact with the repair cafe that exists every month up at Stackwood. And that sort of thing, in order to integrate the new residents as they come in. And this can be, well, this could be the sort of project that could get replicated, not just in this council, but in other councils, because the need to integrate people into the community as they move in is something that it's ongoing all around the city. So I commend to you the chairperson's report, which I did write, from the Nanine Common Garden Group, and keep your eyes peeled. I'll be approaching your staff in the not too distant future with the idea of a project. Thank you.
Barry. Go now to John Alberti.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor, councillors, officers. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here tonight to give you a report on the Justice of the Peace Office and what we do as volunteers. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I am here to give you an update on the Justice of the Peace Office. I would like to thank the council for allowing us to give the service not only to the residents of Fremantle but to the wider community. The Justice of the Peace Office is run by volunteers who give their time freely 1 day a fortnight, including Councillor Jeff Graham. Thank you for your hard work and filling in when someone else can't make it. I would also like to thank the staff at reception for all the help over the years. It's been great, their support. Just to let you know that we have some statistics I have for which I will leave with you, explaining the work that we do, but I'd like just to read some of it out, what we do. So what we do is affidavits, an extra statutory declaration, certified copies, warrants. Unfortunately, some of us cannot do warrants anymore because we are of the age of 75. We are classified as old people. That's all the police work. So what I'd like to put out there to you all, younger officers and councillors, if you are well under the age of 75, please come and see me in my office, and I'm happy to endorse you as the Justice of the Peace, and then we'll send it to the Minister. We are in need of younger JPs because unfortunately we can't do police work, and I'm one of them that can't do police work as I turned 76 this month. The Justice of the Peace Office, thanks to Council, has been running in Fremantle here in the City Council for the past 47 years now, right? And I've been doing it for about 25. Councillor Graham's been a little bit longer than me, I think. It's probably one of the longest serving officers that has been given the free service, about 47 years. I've got here Mayor, which is Deputy Mayor. I would like to also to thank you for your suggestion. This is the Mayor for the suggestion of the photo exhibition for the blessing of the fleet, which was absolutely great. And I'm just wondering whether we can continue that for the next probably 3 years, as in 2028, the blessing of the fleet was turned 80 years old, or 80 years young in Fremantle, obviously because it started in 1948. We had photos in the exhibition from 1950 to 2024. I am not sure whether councillors know, I think some of the councillors here do know, that we had a documentary team from Kapoltosland, or Sister City, here, and they did a documentary. The filmmaker or the documentary guy was Franco Perdichizzi from Onda TV in Sicily on the 27th of October 2024. It not only showcased the blessing of the fleet, but also at Fremantle. It went live on Onda TV in Sicily on the 5th of January 2025, and had one of the biggest viewing of 300,000 people they had. The feedback in Sicily has been amazing, where people want to come to Fremantle now and connect with their families again, which obviously will be good for tourism. I wish to thank the CEO as well, the Mayor and the councillors for the way the visitors from Kapoltosland were received and for the reception here in this beautiful room. Thanks to Melody for her support, and also a big thank you to Maddie. Maddie took so many more phone calls and emails. I think I must have driven her crazy over the time. I don't know how she put up with me, but she was fantastic. Melody sent, if you got the chance to see in this documentary, the very first one, and I'm happy to send it to whoever wants it, the very first one shows all the Fremantle in the, with drone shots, right? And Maddie sent all those to me, and I forwarded to the documentary maker. And yeah, they saw what Fremantle looks like, because sometimes I think that they think that we've got kangaroos running on the streets. Yeah, for taking on more phone calls and emails. Thank you again. I wish you a good night, and I'm happy to leave this with you, right? And it says, and it's got, oh, by the way, we had a document we signed of 25,639 from January 23 to November 24, and we have had 8,010 people in the actual office of the JP. So tells you something how good the JP office runs. Not only that we run Fremantle, we also run Melville, Fiona Stanley, and Coburn, and also Kubalup just up for days. We run that under the Fremantle Association of Justices. I am the president of that association, and it's a great service that we give. So please, if anyone wants to be a JP, come and see me. Be more than happy. I'll give this to Councillor Graham to pass on.
Thank you, John. I'd just like to mention that John was also a former councillor of this council, so thank you for all that service. It seems to be a tradition for some councillors to go and become JPs, so hopefully some will join you. Now, we have one more speaker, Mark Woodcock.
I have my questions on notice, as I couldn't get them to go through the system today. The links weren't working, so I've spoken to the officer and I'll give her a copy of them. So Kong Zi Fat Choi, it's Chinese New Year today, so happy Chinese New Year. My question is on C2501-3, method of conducting the 2025 local government elections and polls. My questions were, why is the council putting this item to a vote before the outcoming disputed election returns are published, which is due in less than 2 weeks? The magistrate's comments and decisions could have valuable information on how local government elections could be run in the future. There is no information or mention of the court case between electors and the WAEC. Surely before entering into new contractual obligations and discussions, it would warrant the mention of the ongoing legal proceedings. Has this been mentioned somewhere? And if not, why? Sorry. Cost comparison. Where is the comparative cost example of an in-person election, and what are the possible scenarios of how that would work? Has the council done any work on this? Are the councillors informed so they can make the best possible decision? Ratepayers' exposure to costs. Why does the agreement seemingly expose ratepayers to costs incurred by the WAEC for its potential failures in running an election? Ratepayers should have a set budget and not an open-ended deal with third-party expenses. On page 17, the point states any legal expense other than that are determined to be borne by the West Australian Electoral Commission in a court of disputed concerns. And are there any other legal expenses that are incurred in that example of taking away expenses from the budget? Uncoded spare ballots in the local election. In the media, we have read reports of the City of Fremantle using uncoded spare ballot papers in the local election, seemingly a far higher amount than other local governments. Can the council confirm this? And if so, how does it ensure these ballots are used correctly and properly accounted for? Transparency in elections is fundamental to democracy, and these questions aim to ensure the principles of transparency and accountability are upheld. Can the council release the operating procedures on using such ballots and in an election and inform the ratepayers how many times they are used and in what volume per ward? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'll ask the CEO to make a comment.
Just through the chair, the City of Fremantle does have an item on the agenda today to consider the Electoral Commission running the conduct of the election for 2025 later in the year. As per usual, the WAC is the only authorised agent that can run a postal election, local government election. City of Fremantle cannot do that, so it's very difficult to compare a cost comparison when we are only allowed to run in-person elections.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe there are any more questions from the public. No? And just before I do go into the rest of the agenda, I do want to just add that the work that John Alberti and all of the JPs do is really a fantastic community asset. And I do thank you, John, for all the work that you've done over the many years on that particular issue. Thank you. Thank you. Right. We'll now go to, petitions. I don't think we have any tonight. No. Deputations, there are none. Presentations, there are none. The minutes from the ordinary meeting of council dated 11th of December. I'll move the minutes from that meeting, seconded by Councillor Lorver. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Elected member communication. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and apologies I didn't...
It's all right. Okay. No, go ahead, Andrew.
I thought you were looking straight at me when you said that.
Sorry.
Apologies, Councillor Thompson.
Who's going to speak, Councillor Thompson or Councillor Sullivan? Councillor Sullivan.
I'm going to turn your mic off then. Apologies I didn't give notice of this, but I did just remind myself that I was going to do this at this meeting as I walked in the door. I just wanted to note the passing of a very good friend of mine and Fremantle architect, Richard Longley. The name Longley obviously is a name that is very well known in Fremantle for quite a lot of reasons. So it's an amazing family. There are lots of, exceptional, world-renowned people in the Longley family. And Richard was one of them, but more importantly, he was a close friend. I wanted to just quickly share three elements. And I know that there's a very good post by Kieran Wong and Emma about Richard from an architectural point of view, and I won't even try and go to speaking about his qualities as an architect. But I did want to just say something about him as a human being and as a Fremantle legend in my book. And the thing that always comes to my mind when I think of Richard is sharks. And I think of it in a positive way, not a negative way. So we don't need any shark barriers or the like when we think of Richard. But sharks were an integral part of my relationship with Richard. One of the versions of the shark stories is, of course, the South Beach campaign to stop a marina being built across the whole of the Dog Beach when the government was looking at the Three Harbours proposal. And I had drawn up fairly quickly an alternative version for that, which Richard saw. And I have never seen someone get so excited about an alternative concept, to the point that within about 24 hours, he'd gone home and actually drawn up his own version, which he called the shark fin. And so there were these two amazing alternative concepts to the government plan that basically showed the government that they didn't need to destroy the entire outlook from the Dog Beach at South Beach, that they could do everything and more that they wanted to do in the Three Harbours without that level of destruction. And so two community-minded people, but one with probably a little bit more street cred in terms of being able to get a meeting with the minister, Richard, that is, were able to get a meeting with the Minister for Planning almost immediately. She saw our two concepts. She stood up in the room with about 18 government bureaucrats and said, "We're not doing our version. I want you to go away and come up with a version that's a bit more like what Richard and Andrew have drawn." And that was the sort of guy that he was, and he was always fighting for better things to happen in the community. The other two shark stories are a little bit closer to home, but one does involve South Beach. Now, Richard was an amazingly curious person. He always wanted to see what was going on. He always wanted to explore. He was like a kid in a candy shop when he was in the ocean. He couldn't help himself, to the point of one day, on a murky day in the water, when I was swimming along and we used to bump into each other quite regularly. I would notice him bumping into me. He never, ever noticed anything other than what he was looking at, so he never noticed that he bumped into me. But I, in this murky water, saw the tail end of a shark. Now, I don't know how big that shark was, but the tail end was probably about the size of this screen. And it disappeared very, very quickly. And I popped up and thinking, how the far am I away from the shore? I need to get the hell out of here. And I could see Richard about 30 metres away. So I swam over to him to tell him to also get the hell out of the water. And his immediate response was, "Where is it? I need to see it." And he swam towards the position that I had just been. That was just his enthusiasm for life, his enthusiasm for nature and everything in the ocean. And the third one is the story that also feels very close to home and involves sharks. I was very lucky to spend 10 days on the Abrolhos Islands with Richard and Kat and some other architect friends. And in this idyllic environment, jumping off the back of a boat, snorkeling out, swimming with a dolphin and its pup, and then swimming back to the boat. And one of the architects on the board of the boat said, "Oh, the dolphins come back." Now, this guy was blind as a bat and didn't have the credentials that Richard had in terms of talking about creatures of the sea. And so I trusted him and started, "Oh, okay, I'll swim out there." I wasn't that far off the back of the boat, but he was wrong. And Richard very sternly said to me, "Andrew, get out of the water now." And I had never ever heard Richard talk with a stern voice ever, because the man was unbelievably gentle of mind and heart. He was always jolly. He was often, mucking around. But on this one occasion, and I'd only ever heard it once, his voice was so clear that I knew exactly what he meant, because there was about a 4-metre tiger shark swimming directly at me about 5 metres away. He was, and the point of that story is much more about the fact that he was just this unbelievably gentle human being. Now, people will also note that Richard was an absolute foundation resident, if you like, of the modern era of the West End. He brought his family up in the West End of Fremantle, and each one of his boys has stories about, fishing in the harbour and mucking around in the streets of Fremantle at a time when perhaps most parents would have thought that wasn't a safe place for kids to muck around. But he was quintessentially Fremantle. We will all miss him. There are so many things in this town that remind me of him. And yeah, Valet Richard Longley. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I totally concur with your comments about the wonderful character of Richard Longley. I can't concur about the shark stories. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. It was pleasing to see two ex-councillors here who were both excellent in their time and are even better now. And it did occur to me that with ex-councillor Sam Wainwright here, that it was appropriate to mention the state government's recent announcement about looking at taking over control of some of the country rail lines. Because Sam was one that has, over a number of, or probably over a couple of years, forcefully advocated for this at multiple meetings of the Walga Zone, and was, if I remember correctly, a member of a Walga task force set up to push for this, for taking over the Tier 3 lines in regard to in support of our country councils. And I think certainly comments that I used to get at Walga were very appreciative of the efforts that our zone, which obviously doesn't have a great interest in country rail lines, the efforts of our zone and the efforts of Sam Wainwright. So it's serendipitous that he is here, and that looks like it may be a goer. The other one is, and again, great to see John Alberti here, and it did occur to me, Madam Deputy Mayor, that if appropriate under other business, that we could I could move a recommendation. I'll leave it up to you whether I can or not, but I would like to move a recommendation to thank John Alberti for the JP's report, and also a vote of thanks from Council to the Justices of the Peace for all of their work. So if you feel that's appropriate, and give you an opportunity at other business, I would move that recommendation.
Certainly. Are there any other elected member communications? Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, I apologise for not flagging this earlier either. I just now remembered that this was something that has come up since we last were all in this chamber. And I've spent a lot of time over the break chatting with people in our community because I've been out handing out a newsletter. And one of the things that's probably my doing is I bring up the port fairly often. And recently, I think everyone has seen that the Cook Labour government has endorsed the Future of Fremantle, I guess, plan or whatever they put forward for North Quay. And I just want to say to this chamber that from my conversation since that plan's come out, it's been more focused on that. And the members of the community, which are dozens and dozens and online, they 100% backed this council's motion earlier to support public transport in that area. And sadly, that was not in the plan put forward. We need a robust public transport system anyways. To handle the 55,000 projected people and 45,000 jobs, we need an even more robust public transport system. Members of the public backed in our position here to advocate to move the trains on South Quay first. I think that's a sensible way to go forward. Move the railroad, move the livestock, move the bulk stuff first, develop that South Quay area, connect it to Fremantle before looking at exploring the other bit there. And then lastly, by and large, people think if the state government is going to make this decision, that really considering giving that land to the Whadjuk Noongar Corporation to develop economically and culturally as they see fit, they think that was a really smart position for this council to have taken. Personally, I was disappointed in what was put forward, especially given the timelines, but I'll save that for another day. I just wanted to reiterate those conversations with the community that really were pleased that this council had taken those positions. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lorber. No further elected member communications? No. Councillor Thompson, we don't have an other business, but so we might put it in under a late item. Just a small comment, yeah. Reports from the officers. Could I just get perhaps we'll just work through a couple, just more straightforward. I'll move C25011, which is the information report on the AUKUS petition response. Is there a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Moughlin. Are there any speakers on that item? Councillor Lorber.
Just a couple of questions. First off, I just want to clarify: has this council voted on anything AUKUS related in the past, or nuclear policy related in the past? Because I don't recall anything like that coming before this council.
No, there's been no direct consideration of the AUKUS in this council.
Just wanted to clarify that. And this is more of a governance question. If people were, or if councillors were inclined to want to have a more robust response than what's contained in here, given we don't assume, well, I don't want to assume anything, I want to ask, would that require an alternate recommendation? Would that require a deferral? Or how would the best way to get to that, if that was something that people were deciding that was required?
Could I just make one comment? This is a draft report. It's not our report. It's going to the... This is the petition. Oh, sorry, the petition. Sorry, I've got the wrong thing. Yeah. I'll pass it over to the CEO.
Well, it's obviously up for council to make a decision on whether they want to receive this report or not. If council were not inclined to receive the report, they can either defer it or seek for further information to come back.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, thank you. I think Councillor Lorber makes a very obvious point that does need to be thought about. Both of the policies were developed before the notion of AUKUS was dreamt up, quite a long time before the notion of AUKUS was dreamt up. Now, one of those policies, I believe, is due for review sometime at the end of this year. Yep. And so it's effectively due for review anyway. But it does seem that, as both of those policies were developed with good intent, that the changing circumstances that AUKUS brings should deliver an opportunity for us to review and reflect and include whatever is needed into those policies to make them, I guess, AUKUS robust. Now, I don't want to do that on the run, and I, haven't really had the opportunity to think about a lot of it over the last 5 or 6 months. But I think we should do that. So, I don't think we necessarily. I don't have a problem with receiving the information report because, it's on the table. It's there. But I do believe that we as an elected council have a responsibility to bring our policies in line with the changing circumstances. Now, the circumstances couldn't be more changing. AUKUS is really not all that old, and I'm already wondering whether there is, in fact, a strategic alliance between the three countries that are a party to AUKUS, when one of them seems to be heading down a path that is leading us to more likely than not being an ally rather than being an ally into the future. Now, I don't want to read the tea leaves too much right at this moment, but the first week of Donald Trump's tenure has been one of the most appalling things I've ever seen. And if there was a World War III, heaven forbid, I really seriously wonder whether we'd actually even be on the same side. And I make that comment, I make it in a good way. I guess, in the context of this week, the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz and the like, we do need to take these things seriously. And the comments that have been made, I wasn't aware that that our mayor had relinquished a position in the Mayors for Peace. I guess that's her prerogative, but that doesn't necessarily change the view of the people of Fremantle. It shouldn't necessarily change the view of the council. So I'm not sure whether I don't think we need a changed recommendation, but what I would ask is that elected members be given an opportunity to review both of the policies relevant to this in the upcoming informal elected member cycle. So if I can put that request forward, bearing in mind that one of them needs to be reviewed anyway, so that other elected members have an opportunity to bring forward their thoughts as to how we should respond to this.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. I'll invite the CEO to make some comment.
Thank you through the chair. If council are inclined, they could initiate a part 2 to this current resolution seeking the CEO do a review of the current policy on the nuclear-free status of Fremantle, and we could bring that back at another time and maybe bring it back through an IM where we could talk to council about it.
Councillor Sullivan, did you wish to add to anything?
I'm happy to move that. I mean, if the CEO feels that that would be helpful in terms of this year's agenda items, I'm happy to move that way.
Yep. Is there a seconder? I mean, I'm happy to second it.
Yep.
Councillor Moughlin is happy to second it. Councillor Moughlin, did you wish to speak to the amendment?
Yeah, happy to do so.
Given that you wish to
And
speak
just-
anyway.
Yeah, I'll just do it in general. But just noting on that point 1 that it refers to no further action is required in response to this petition. I suppose point 2 is actually the response to the petition, so prefer that is deleted from point 1. And I think, you know, the point that Sam has made in regards to the response to the petition, there most probably isn't a lens through which the CEO could particularly review those, you know, those changing circumstances. The policy was in regards to nuclear facility and activity in Fremantle, and the, if you like, footprint of nuclear impacts are significant, whatever it may be, and the risks associated with it. And if we are going to be having nuclear-powered submarines based at Stirling, as a council, we most probably should consider how we bring that into our policies, and whether it is a position of advocacy or otherwise, whatever that might be, we need to have that conversation. So, yeah, fully supportive of the proposed amendment.
Councillor Sullivan, you happy with the change to the amendments, both bits? Yep. Okay. Just on the amendment, all those in favour? All those in favour on the amendment? It is unanimous, yes?
Deputy Mayor,
This is
it's
just on the
both
amendment.
policies, so that was still typing as we were voting.
Oh.
So can we just ensure that we're talking about both policies?
Yes, well, you did mention both policies. It says relevant council policies. I
All this,
presume
but
that
then as we were
included.
voting, the nuclear-free Fremantle one came in, so it's also the.
Do we have the name of the other one?
I don't have the exact name of it's quite long and convoluted from memory.
Okay. Well, we could
But
just
yeah.
say the relevant council policies.
Yeah.
It's more than one. It's
Thank
plural. Okay. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Now, Councillor Lorber.
Yeah, I want to thank Councillor Moughlin for that amendment to point 1, because I think that's pretty relevant. I'm really happy with this point 2 being added. I think this is a great probably time to have this discussion about where we're at as a city, and I look forward to that, and it's going to be hopefully very robust and get us to a really, really good place. I will support this now as it is, but I also want to say I think that we probably, under our existing policy, could do more with what was put before us in the petition, as pointed out by former Councillor Sam Wainwright. And if those things are to be actioned, just flag that. I guess it'll be up to us to maybe bring it through a NOM or something if we wanted to call on the Commonwealth Government to just to, you know, basically do those bits of advocacy. Would that be appropriate to do through a NOM, or how would those bits then be taken care of?
Through the chair, I think that if we wait to see what the policy review does as far as an advocacy position goes, you may or may not require a nom at the back end of it.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Lang.
Just have a question. This is a really neat solution that might take away from where I was going to go next, but it's a question through the chair for the CEO. In response to the questions that Sam asked, and there was new information presented this evening, how long might it take for us to address or revise some of the answers we've given in the report if, for example, we did defer this item? I don't want to hold up point 2 here, but if we did defer this item to provide clarity on some of our answers in light of the information this evening, would that hold up point 2 at all?
Through the chair, I think there's a couple of pieces here. One is the advocacy position of council on AUKUS, which doesn't exist. Yep. The second piece is that the current nuclear-free policy on Fremantle really does talk about facilities in Fremantle and doesn't talk about it, and that's within the district, doesn't talk about outside, and acknowledges the fact that nuclear vessels will be parked at Gage Road. So there's a lot of work to do on our policy.
Could I just add that we can always bring things back in the future, but reviewing the policies would be a place to start. And I think too that, for me, I feel like there is so much information we don't have to hand that it would be good to spend some time trying to get more information.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, I was just hoping the CEO might say we could refresh some of those answers inside 2 weeks quite easily. Okay. Okay, well, I will park the deferral I had there. I don't think I get support for it anyway, looking around the room, but thank you for answering those questions, Glenn.
Okay, is there any more comment on this item? Otherwise, I'll put it to a vote as amended. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. We now go to item 2, which is related to some of this discussion, which is to do with the report on the Perth Southwest Metropolitan Alliance delegation to the US. And I'll just add too that this is a draft report, not our report, not our draft report. It's a draft which we've been supplied with, and it's really out there for people to be able to be informed by it one way or another, and also it will go to the Perth Southwest group in February. So I think we can take on board that there's a lot more to come out of this yet too. So I'll move that item, seconded by Councillor Lang. Is there any discussion?
I have a couple questions.
Councillor Lorva's up first. Sorry, I'll look at this bit. Yeah, Councillor Lorva.
Yeah, just a few questions on this, and about how this report was generated and the decision-making process going into it. I was hoping, this was kind of just there one day. I was hoping that someone could explain how the decision was made to go on this trip at the Perth Southwest Metro Alliance. Was there a vote of the members, or just how was the decision made to actually go on this trip?
Switch it off.
Yeah, sorry, it just keeps going green for some reason.
That's always been the case.
Andrew.
Thank you. Through the chair, a report was prepared by the executive of the Perth Southwest Metropolitan Alliance to the board meeting of March 2024 and endorsed at that board meeting by the board.
So the decision was made to go on the trip March 2024? Okay. And the members of the board are the mayors that vote on that?
Yep, the mayors of the member councils.
And the Southwest Metro Alliance is funded by member councils, obviously. Was there anything or any discussion that you know of when this was discussed and voted on about that funding being available for other items? I don't know, maybe measuring tree canopy or saving the snake neck turtle, or just, was there any discussion about how those funds could otherwise be spent that you know of?
Through the chair, I wasn't at the actual meeting particularly, but I recall the report just talking about how we might fund it from reserves of that Southwest group.
So probably not. And then my last question about this is a very generic draft report, and I understand that. Will there be, and I struggled to find Fremantle-specific things in here. There was some brief mention of Rockingham. Will there be specific reports back to LGAs that talk about, like, you know, our specific role in this and what was learned from the trip and how Fremantle can respond? Because we're going to be quite different than Rockingham with our AUKUS positions and probably how we will respond. Will there be LGA-specific reports?
One single report is all that's been prepared and was all that was considered to be prepared at the time.
Is there any other comment from councillors? There were others. Councillor Lang.
Just a clarification. On line 3, it says this report was prepared for the Perth Southwest Metropolitan Alliance. Was it prepared for the Alliance? Was it prepared by the Alliance? Referring to the attached document or the actual officer's report?
It's a report prepared for the next board meeting of the Alliance. By the Alliance staff. By the executive of the Alliance.
Okay. That's the only question I had. But then further to that, I just wanted to add a note, if I could, to this item I've sent through to Melody already. The first one was, I don't want to be accidentally lumped in the basket, or all of us, that we are, I don't know what our positions are individually, but I just wanted to clarify that we don't have a position on AUKUS as a note. And the other part was that none of us here actually endorsed the trip to the United States either. So I just wanted to put those as notes here, because I don't want to be assumed if someone picks up this agenda that perhaps we have all endorsed AUKUS and we all endorsed the trip to the US.
You're moving that as a minor amendment. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lorver, is there any?
It actually currently says, sorry, someone's going to have to turn off their mic, ratepayer funded, and I know it is in a sense ratepayer funded, in that we funded the Alliance, but the Alliance funded the trip, which is why we didn't need to endorse it, is my recollection of the process. So they were funds that were excessed from the 2020 COVID year, from memory, the monies that were unspent by the Alliance executive, and that's where that came from. It is also the reason why we didn't have to sign off on the trip. The wording needed to be clear, because,
Councillor Lang, are you comfortable with that change?
I'd prefer to leave it in, but if Councillor Sullivan wants to nuance that.
Well, it's saying we do
that's
not
fine.
endorse the trip would infer, I think, that we didn't endorse the funding of it either. I mean, we just didn't endorse it, full stop. Yep.
I prefer to leave it in, and then we can vote individually on that item at that line if you want.
I was just trying to clarify it, yeah. Is there a seconder to this amendment who is happy to have the ratepayer funded part in there? Councillor Lorver, you're seconding it. Okay, is there any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Mofflin.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose for myself, the did not endorse suggests that we actually took an action to not endorse the trip, and that's not something that council did. And this, you know, regardless of whether we support individually, as Councillor Lang said, the trip or not, I think it would be more appropriate to refer to that this was a decision that was made by the Southwest Alliance, as opposed to council not endorsing, because we actually didn't take an action to not endorse. And I think it's somewhat misleading to have did not endorse as part of as part of that statement. So I can't support it in its current form, and I'll leave it with Councillor Lang as to whether that's something he's particularly interested in.
Councillor Lang, would you like?
Happy to leave it and
Councillor Thompson.
Oh, yeah, I'd make the same point, Madam Deputy Mayor. Look, once we pay organisations for services that they provide to the city, that becomes their money. You can talk, you know, everything at the end of the day you can say is ratepayer money, but when you pay somebody else, it's their money to deal with as they wish. And indeed, we didn't endorse it, but they never asked us to endorse it, and it wasn't up to us whether or not they're an independent body with their own CEO, and they make their decisions according to how they see their priorities. So endorsing or not endorsing was not a role that we had in that decision.
Are there any further comments? You've already spoken on the amendment. We're talking about the amendment. Yep. I thought he did. Does he ask? Oh.
Yeah, just
If you
briefly
wish,
from me.
sorry, Councillor Kamada, we'll just go back and it was kind of like a question and a bit of a comment, but did you have something really urgent you wish to say and add to this? No? Okay, Councillor Kamada.
I'll be
Thank you.
brief anyway. Yeah, I just agree with Councillor Thompson and Councillor Mofflin that if it wasn't our decision, and then perhaps if Councillor Lang wants to make that clear, just in terms of transparency, I could support something like that, but I couldn't support it in that form.
Thank you. No further comment? I tend to agree too. I think it would be reasonable to say that this was the trip was a decision of the Southwest Group, not council. But I mean, I'm quite happy with part 2, which clearly states we don't have a formal position on AUKUS as well. So I'll put it to a vote. This is on the amendment. All those in favour of part 2? Part 2 is just council does not have a formal position on AUKUS. Those in favour? Are those against? Councillors Van Dawson and Graham are against. And that is carried. And so part 3, all those in favour? Those against? Councillors Kamada, Mofflin, well, you've got them, haven't you? Yep. They are against. So part 3 is lost, part 2 is supported. Is there any further discussion on the motion as a whole? Councillor Sullivan.
Firstly, I just had a question that in part flows from public question time relating to, I guess, the study tour's exploration of the issues to do with hazards relating to nuclear-powered submarines and what measures need to be put in place should there be an accident or an event of any type. So having ploughed through the report, there wasn't very much on that, if anything at all. So I'm just wondering from the CEO, was there information gleaned in that regard?
Through the chair, the delegation did meet with the emergency management response team from City of San Diego and discussed with them how they manage their stuff with the naval base. The reality was, and this was recanted to us several times in some of the other discussions, there's never been a nuclear accident. Their main issues are environmental issues, and it'd be up to the Australian government and our local emergency management response team to work out how to deal with that. Pretty much their responses to the possibility of a nuclear accident were it's never occurred in 50 years. It's probably an unlikely event compared to other environmental factors.
Councillor Lorver.
Yeah, I'm just make a comment on the item and may have a minor amendment point 3 to put forward. I just want to point out on page 13 of the report that taxation income by tier of government in the U.S. is not correct. The numbers themselves don't add up, but that's a minor thing. But each state and local government tax their people differently. And so whoever puts this report together, just I guess for noting or whatever, that having a generalized thing about the United States is not really possible. So they may actually want to take the time to break that out, because like Washington State has no income taxes, but they have a sales tax. Oregon has no sales tax, but they have an income tax. California has both. Virginia has a mix of the two. And then each local government authority sets their own taxation level. So breaking it out like that, there might be a national average, but it really is different in each state. It's a hot mess over there, as we know. So I just wanted to point that out. I lived in Washington State, where the Hanford nuclear site is existing, and it is a Superfund cleanup site. They have low-level radioactive storage waste that they spend billions of dollars every year trying just not to leak into the Columbia River. Sometimes they're successful, some years they are not. There's a huge effort to clean up the waste from the experiments that were done in the 50s, and I'm just telling you, it is still ongoing. It is practically, there are generations of people that live in the Tri-Cities that now fathers have passed trays on down to their kids to try to stop that from happening. So storing waste is not an exact science. It is something that is, it is very, very dangerous. So I think, there are a lot of levels, I guess, to what we're looking at here with AUKUS, but I just wanted to point that out. I come from a part of the United States where radioactive waste is routinely leaking and not good for the environment. So in light of point 3 not being passed, would it be appropriate if I suggested that we put at a point 3 just to clarify that the decision to go on the AUKUS trip was made by the mayors who serve on the PSWMA? Just that the decision was made by those people to go on the trip?
You're moving that as an amendment, yes? It's either the mayors or it's the PSW, it's the organisation itself, yeah. The board, yeah. The board of the PSWMA. Yeah.
And if we wanted to clarify and not by any local council, but that's...
I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, it's made by that board, not us. Yeah. All right, that's a minor amendment. Is there a seconder to that amendment? Councillor Lang. Is there any discussion on that particular amendment? Councillor Thompson.
Madam Deputy Mayor, my understanding is that the decision to go on the AUKUS trip was made by the board of the PWSMA after invitation from an appropriate authority. Is that correct? Have I asked the CEO?
Through the chair, the item was prepared for the board immediately prior to that invitation coming out. So actually a decision was made to contemplate it prior to an invitation actually formally coming.
So just as a further comment, I mean, this is a nothing, because obviously, if the decision was not made by us, it was made by the PWMA. So, on the broader principle, though, of the PSWMA, I much prefer it when it was called the Southwest Groups. If this council has a concern about what this organisation does with the money that we provide, then it certainly is appropriate for council to express that, but to do so, it would need to put some qualification in the money. When we provide the money to the Southwest Group, I'll call it that, then it would be appropriate for us to put conditions on how we would like that money to be spent. And so, for example, the PSWMA Southwest Group goes every year to Canberra. Do we want to make decisions about whether that should happen each year? I don't have a problem if council wants to do that, but if you want to control another organisation or what it does, then you do so by changing the agreement whether you have that with that organisation and putting conditions on the funding that you provide. So I just offer that as a way forward for those councillors who are concerned about the trips that this organisation goes on.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Lang.
Yeah, I seconded this, and obviously it's a watered-down version of the last piece I moved. I think mine was a bit more point blank. By the PSWMA is funded by ratepayers. There's no other way to dress that up. it's when we are getting asked in the street as elected members, why are our rate money going to send people to America to view AUKUS and submarines and whatnot. I support this point 3 because I never made that decision to spend our money on going to America for the AUKUS trip. And so, as I said initially, I just want to note that we don't have a formal position, and I've never voted on it, and I didn't vote to send anybody there or spend our money on that trip.
Councillor Sullivan.
I don't want to, expand this debate, but seriously, the motion before basically was saying that we didn't make a decision about a budgetary item of spending money. So the council would have been outside of its duties if we had allowed money to be spent. That was directly our decision as to how it should be spent, and we had failed to do that. Councillor Lang, you voted, I presume, for the budget each year that you've been a councillor, and every other councillor has. And as Councillor Thompson said, we have supported the PSWMA for a very, very long time, and it hasn't come with strings, and we haven't specifically tried to control how they, as a collective, spend their money. That has been provided for largely from ratepayers of the different organisations. And that's how it's been. Now, if you want to change that, then your duty is to come forward with a motion that seeks to change that. But to kind of like make it sound, like we haven't done our duty by signing off on a trip. The opportunity to talk about the trip was available when the Mayor announced that was happening. There was every opportunity to put an elected member's motion forward. This is a statement of fact as it currently stands. The previous suggestion was, in fact, an indictment, potentially, that this council hadn't done its duty in signing off on a budgetary item, and that's why I didn't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Mofflin. Sorry, I didn't pick it up.
No, that's all right. Thank you. Picking up on the sentiment that councillors have shared in regards to, I suppose, the transparency of the activity of the alliance itself. A question to the CEO around how those activities of the alliance are generally shared with members, and how is that reported during the year or not, and is that something that we could consider to be sharing with council at a frequency that's appropriate?
Through the chair, intermittently in the past, the executive of the Perth South West Metro Alliance has come and engaged with council. In fact, it was one of the decisions made at the last board meeting that we would seek the executive to come early in 2025 and speak to each of the councils.
Thank you. Is there any further comment on this item? Yep, this is on part 3, the amendment. I don't think we've dealt with that, have we? Yep. So part 3 has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Those against? Yeah. All right. Those against? Got that? 3. Yep. Okay. So that's carried. Yep. Thank you. Now we're dealing with the whole of the officer's recommendation as amended, and I just want to make a brief comment that I did support the item when it came through council, as did I think nearly all of us, if not all of us, because this is a major proposition for our region, and to have people go and better understand how these things operate overseas, I think is a reasonable thing to do. I must admit I still have a great number of questions following the report that's been submitted, and hopefully the mayors of the region will ask questions too when they go to the meeting where this is discussed. So I'm very happy to have these amendments made to this document, but I think for all of us, there will be many, many more questions in the future about where we head with this. So on that, there's no further comment. Councillor Sullivan on the whole motion?
Yep.
Okay.
Which I've only asked a question on.
Yep, thank
just in case anyone thinks that's not the case. A couple of things. I mean, I genuinely believe that Freo, more than almost any local authority, often has to deal with matters where we, in representing our local community, probably have pretty strong understanding that there are aspects that are of government decisions that are not well liked by our community, and I can think of numerous issues that we've dealt with over even the last 24 months where our community has had to both play a very active role in the decision making of other government levels, has had to kind of like stay involved even though there have been proposals that we don't like at all, but need to be at the table constantly to try and get the best outcome for our community. And that's probably always going to be the case. And I think it's the case when it comes to this. There are things that we absolutely need to be at the table at, because the reality is the decisions are probably not going to be greatly impacted by what individual communities say or do. That's already been clear, but that doesn't, and it shouldn't stop us from saying the sorts of things that I think our community want us to say in relation to this. The two that stand out for me particularly are the notion that the federal government through the Department of Defence can be both the operator and the auditor or the safety auditor of the system. To me is just an absolute red flag that should never be happening. And again, if you quite happily reference the United States right now, where the inspectors general and the like are being absolutely hounded out of existence, and the ability for just one person to remove all oversight and all review. So we absolutely, in an open democracy like ours, we need to make sure there is great transparency in agencies that are specifically there to be regulators of something as important as nuclear, the use of nuclear power in any circumstance. And the idea that the federal government sees that that's something that should be governed by the same people who are the operators of the said nuclear power is just ridiculous. And I think that should influence the way we look into the policy reviews. And that kind of gets me to the second thing, which is the genuine thing that is really, really close to home, which is what the hell happens if there is some form of an accident. And the accidents can be in either the form of what is an event actually on an operating submarine that almost certainly is carrying both nuclear energy but nuclear weapons. The notion that there are going to be 5 submarines based here running around in and out of Fremantle that they're owned by the Yanks and the Poms, and that they're not going to have nuclear weapons on them is kind of amusing, but not very believable. So we need to be considering both aspects. But there's also, as former Councillor Wainwright, but also Councillor Lawver have mentioned, there are those issues of the lack of, science around storing temporarily for God knows how many centuries or whatever, the nuclear waste and where that's going to happen and the like. You know, we haven't been given, as a community, very many assurances. You know, we hear, oh, it's not going to be, you know, the American and British won't be using our facilities to deal with their waste. Well, that's just not logical, because if any works that are done on a submarine of that type, there will be some form of waste coming out of that. You can't do works on a machine like that without actually having to dispose of some form of nuclear waste products. And so that information needs to be really, really clear. This notion that, oh, well, so far we've heard, and I don't mean to be dismissive of the CEO's comment, he was just reporting what was said. The notion that, well, it's nothing to worry about because we haven't had an accident in 50 years. Well, we all know that, risk management is a combination of different elements. It's like, well, okay, what are the chances of it happening? But what are the consequences of it happening? So if the consequences are really, 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 really dramatic, really serious, really impacting, but the chances are still low, then it still might be the number one risk issue for the people of Fremantle. We need to have an understanding of that, and that needs to influence us in terms of making policy. And I would expect that we would need to have a bit more of an understanding of that, and certainly a lot more than was presented in this report from the Perth South West region. We need to have a much better understanding in terms of how that influences Fremantle's position on nuclear-powered submarines coming through waters close to us, being repaired in waters and on land close to us, and being stationed a little bit further away from us. So all of those things are relevant, and I want to make it clear that should be understood when we deal with policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. On the slightly off the point issue here, which is that this is a report from the Perth South West Metropolitan Alliance, and some years ago when it was the South West Groups, and there has been, as Councillor Mofflin asked that question about information flow from the Alliance, and I think it's an appropriate question because there was a time in the past when it was South West Groups that the South West Group would provide a written report through the Walga zone, which then any items of interest could be brought up by a councillor at council meeting. So could I just request the CEO to perhaps put that on the agenda for the Alliance? Because I do think it's a little bit, and I can understand some of the concern from councillors when you just simply suddenly get this report from this body that we fund with ratepayer money, but you hear nothing from them for the next year. And meanwhile, all of this other stuff is going on behind. I know, and the Alliance does a lot of work behind the scenes. I'm aware of that from my time on the zone. So could I ask the CEO to actually do something about this in return in terms of the information flow to councillors from the Alliance?
Through the chair, certainly.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Is there any further comment on the item as a whole? Okay, all those in favour of the item as amended? That is unanimous, I believe. Yeah, thank you. Yep. Yes, we have Councillor Graham is not in the room. Yep. Thank you. We'll now move on to item 3, which was the third item that the public had some comment on. So I will move C25013, which is the method for conducting the 25 local government elections and other polls, seconded by Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion on this item? Councillor Lorver?
Yeah, just a question. Statutorily, is there any, I guess, urgency in us adopting this tonight? Are we under a time frame under the gun to get this approved tonight, or is it something that we can kind of potentially defer?
Just through the chair, there is a statutory time frame. I think we have to say it by the end of February or the end of, yep. It could be deferred for 4 weeks.
Councillor Lang?
Just a question. For point 2, conducting the election as a postal election, my interpretation was there's still the ability for people to drop their votes off on election day as per normal. All right.
Councillor Kamada?
My turn. Yeah, well, Councillor Lorva asked the question I was going to ask, and I was thinking of moving a deferral, and very simply, I mean, it's not something I want to vote against, but quite simply, I feel if we wait to February 11, just to respect the process of what's happening in terms of the hearing and the judgment that will be made, that if there was an appetite for it, I would support deferring until after February 11. But as I say, I'm happy to do that if there's appetite in the room.
Seeing as we're not under the... Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Lorva. I'll just ask to see if he wished to make a comment about the question Councillor Kamada had.
I can only repeat, it's a statutory timeframe requirement. We can delay it for 4 weeks if that's council's intention.
Sorry. Thank you.
Councillor Lorva, I'll just go back to Councillor Kamada just because he was asking a question. Did you have anything else you wished to add, or are you going to come back later?
I could go cut to the chase. I'm happy to move a deferral if I have a seconder, and then we vote on it. If it gets through, it does. If it doesn't, so be it.
Well, perhaps you're not moving a deferral at this point. You're going to, yes, Councillor Lorva.
Great. I would support a deferral on this, seeing as we're not under a statutory deadline, but I just wanted to make a comment on the item itself, so I'm glad that there's a brief moment in time where I can say what I'm going to say. And that is a little over 3 years ago when I ran an election campaign for the first time for local government here in Fremantle. On the day of the election, the day itself, I was referring multiple people who had lost their ballots, who their dog ate their, who whatever. There's probably at least a half dozen to maybe a dozen folks that live way out in Hilton and Sampson. And I said, if you drive down into the Fremantle, they'll give you a new ballot. And those ballots were on hand because they were some of the unmarked or whatever ballots, provisional ballots, what we call them in the United States. And what was done was they made sure that those people did not return their barcoded ballots, and then those ballots were counted. So I'm assuming a similar process when I hear. So the fact that Fremantle has a higher number of those provisional ballots being used, it might be my fault because I was encouraging people to actually come down because they had lost their actual postal ballots. So just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Is there any more discussion on this? Otherwise, if we're going to vote on it, we vote on it, and if anything changes in February, then that can be dealt with in February. But this is a decision to lock in a certain process. So, Councillor Mofflin, do you wish to speak on that?
Yeah, I'm just to add, because if I'm correct, I can't speak on a deferral. I can't see any reason why, regardless of what the outcome of a decision on the 11th of February is, that this would change how we would manage local government elections. Council isn't skilled up to be able to run an election. We have great people here, but the added burden of trying to run a local government election is excessive for us, and I'm fully supportive of this officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Graham.
Oh, yeah, look, I mostly wouldn't support the deferral, but Sam, I'm sort of implicated in this whole bloody affair. It has been a stressful period. I mean, every week someone says, oh, what's going on with this, thingo, blah, 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 and I don't know. Are you going to run if you've got to be run again? I said, well, I don't know. It's... Councillor Williamson Wong's not here, but I'm sure she's found more stress than I have over this issue. And I mean, I know the Fremantle local government's not to blame for any of it, but it's not a nice thing to be in. And the quicker it's over and done with one way or the other, the better. I'll support this, but if the deferral gets up, I'll support that as well. So that's how I sort of feel with it, because I'm over it.
It's my understanding that this we need to kind of lock in because we have to do it, and the other process will be determined apparently in 2 weeks. So the outcome of that will be something we'll deal with, whether we are able to bring another item back and include it in this election, or whether it's dealt with sooner, or whether we don't have to do anything at all. We don't know. So it's my understanding that that can be dealt with when we have a decision. So we have the motion before us. I'll just move, the motion has been moved and seconded, so no further discussion. We'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. So now, could I just ask which items people would like to speak on for the rest of the agenda so that we could move some en bloc? Are there any other items people wish to speak on? Amazing. Okay. Well, I shall move items 25014 through to... we might have to do 5 separately because of... No, that's good. Through to 8. Just noting that in 5 we do have Councillor Wong nominating for a vacancy in a working group, but that's all in the agenda. So for those, I'll move those, seconded by Councillor Lang. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. There are no committee reports. There are no motions of which previous notion. Yeah, 8 late items. No notice of which previous, no motions of which previous notice has been given. No urgent business. And under late items, we agreed that we would include a note from Councillor Thompson. Councillor Thompson, shall I hand the... Right.
Question of ability to do that under standing orders if it's not urgent.
Well, I did
It's something
agree.
that could be simply done at the next
It's a
meeting.
late
I don't
item.
disagree,
It is
but
late.
But late items still need to have be given notice of,
I'll
unless there
defer
is a
to
matter
the-
of urgency. Although I would defer to governance to remind me whether we've changed that.
Councillor Thompson, I'll defer to the Manager of Governance for an answer.
Just through the chair, there is a section in the standing orders which allows new business under special circumstances, in which we can take that if you do agree with that.
Used to be the special circumstance was it was a decision that needed to be made immediately and couldn't wait till the next meeting. Is that how it's written now?
Councillor Sullivan, I think it's in the spirit of the goodwill of the evening that it would be appropriate to make the comment tonight because Mr Alberti has come to our chamber tonight and made comment about the JP's work, and I think in the circumstances it would be very good of us to go along with this. So, Councillor Thompson, I'll pass the...
I think enough said, Madam Chair. I mean, it's nice, great to see Don here, and I am conscious of the work that they do. Every time I come in, there seems to be somebody there in the Justice of the Peace Office, and I don't think we've actually really moved to a formal vote of thanks before, so I think this is appropriate. And if I could just, the wording, support the work of the Justice of the Peace and offers a vote of thanks for the Justices of the Peace for their work and dedication to the community. Thank you.
Is there a seconder to this motion? Seconded by Councillor Lang. Is there any further discussion?
Just a quick comment. Can we make
Councillor
sure
Sullivan.
that it's not only received but included in the minutes?
Thank you. So any further comment? All those in favour of the motion? That is unanimous. Thank you. There is no further business for the evening, so thank you very much, and I'll declare the meeting closed.